Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Not long ago I made a Nikon D7200 announcement thoughts video, and I kind of just went over the specs and gave some of my initial impressions. But since all the camera companies are very fast about getting their product to the market these days, I actually have the camera in my hands to look at for you today. The 7200 is still the same type of body that we have in the 7100, so I'll kind of, not go through my whole disappointment and everything about that again. Even though it's the same body on the outside, on the inside the camera is actually improved quite a bit. We've got the new X-Speed 4 processor on this one, which allows us to do 1080p video at up to 60 frames a second now. The continuous shooting speed is still 6 frames a second, but the buffer on this camera is about 3 times as large also. And that's something I'm going to compare with the 7100 for you guys too today. The other thing about this camera is the new X-Speed 4 processor. Even though there's not really a huge marked difference in terms of the focus system of this camera, it's a little bit more sensitive in low light, but aside from that, it's pretty much the same. However, the newer processor should mean that we see better performance out of the focusing system, because of course with a faster processor the camera is going to be able to do better AF tracking and things like that. So that's something else that we should see. The image sensor in this camera is not the same Toshiba unit found in the D7100. Apparently Nikon is going back to a Sony sensor. It still doesn't have an optical low pass filter, so we still get very sharp results. And I actually expect a little bit better noise performance out of this one as well. Now, the ISO range, of course, is going a little crazy on this one. Instead of 100 to 6400, we're now from 100 to 25,600. So, not that any of us are going to be shooting at 25,600 ISO, but as you guys know, if you're comparing cameras and you're shooting at say 1600 or 3200 with this camera and say the previous model, we should see better high ISO performance whenever we're shooting with this one. So if we're shooting at the same, say 3200 ISO, this one should do better. And that's something that I will verify. I've already shot some sample images. Whenever Adobe actually comes out with their newer RAW converter, I'll post a little annotation in this video so you guys know that the sample photos are up. The other thing about this camera too that of course is a really big deal in terms of focus system in my opinion is Nikon's new group autofocus. So this actually allows us to be able to focus using a group of points as opposed to just a single point, and that's something I'll show you guys here in a second. It's the same thing that Nikon did on the D810 and the D750. So a lot of those improvements have just trickled down to this camera. And let me see, the other big thing of course is the fact that we have Wi-Fi built into this camera too. And I mentioned in another video, I think maybe the 5500 video, that I've noticed that all the cameras that have Wi-Fi built in seem to perform much better with the Wi-Fi than the cameras that use one of Nikon's wireless adapters. And this is something that I saw in this camera too. I did a little bit of a range test with the Wi-Fi on this camera yesterday, and I was able to get about 50 feet away from the camera with a smartphone, and I was still able to control it. So that's something that is a huge deal in my opinion. And of course the Wi-Fi for this camera supports NFC built in as well, so if you have a device that will work with that, it can definitely simplify the pairing of the device for Wi-Fi use. We're going to go ahead and take a closer look at the camera right now. I'm kind of going to make this kind of a comparison video as well, and I have a 7100 that I can show you guys side by side so we get a much better feel of how things have changed. Well guys, since as I just mentioned, the 7200 is basically the exact same camera body, there's not going to be a whole lot of new stuff to show here really. I have, let's see here, I also have a D7100 here that we can use to compare. And I mean they're both practically identical. There's really not just a whole lot of difference going on here. The LCD screen hasn't changed, the button layouts haven't really changed. Like I say, they're pretty much the exact same. It's pretty much the exact same thing going on here. If we take a look at the connections there. So yeah, pretty much the exact same thing happening here. The 7200, of course, displays its Wi-Fi logo proudly, but pretty much the exact same thing going on both cameras. If you come over to this side of the 7200, you can see our little NFC spot here. Now, I had to try this with a friend's Android powered phone because I have an iPhone and it won't work with that. But it did make the setup very, very easy. I will be updating my Wi-Fi setup video very, very soon as well to talk about that a little bit. And I also may do a comparison showing the difference between the cameras that have the Wi-Fi adapter versus the ones that have Wi-Fi built in. Because as I mentioned a moment ago, I have seen a very, very big difference in terms of speed. Still 2 card slots here. Of course, we're still dealing with the same ENEL15 type battery. The interface here is a little different than it was on the previous Nikon models, except for cameras like the DF, for example, and like the 810. So they keep updating this interface, and I actually do like this. It is easier to see whenever you hit your buttons, just like on the 750 and 810. You see the function of both dials. They're saying, hey, okay, if you hit this ISO button, you can change ISO with the back dial. If you use the front dial, then you can change between your auto ISO on and off. So I like how they have that interface now. It shows you, because on a lot of the previous cameras, a lot of people didn't realize that they could rotate the front dial to do something. So I like how they show you what both dial does on screen now. It's very intuitive, especially for users that are new to Nikon. You can see whenever I hit the autofocus button, and that's something we've had since the D7000 camera, so pretty much everyone's familiar with that. Of course, we can do our focus modes. The big thing here though is that we now have the... Okay guys, sorry about the very, very abrupt cutout there. Normally I would have reshot that part, but the reason I didn't reshoot it is because while I was looking at this camera, I was actually expecting to be able to show you guys the group AF, and as of today, which today is March the 20th, Nikon actually lists group AF as one of the options on the D7200, and it actually doesn't have group AF. So you guys can see, I showed a bunch of samples with this camera yesterday and tested its buffer, but I did not actually look to see if it had group AF until I started filming this video, and I was going off the specification sheet, and sure enough there's actually no group AF option on this camera. So hopefully Nikon USA will update that. But anyways, the focus adjustment is exactly the same as it has been on all the other Nikon models in this range. The other thing too, speaking of initial specifications that haven't turned out to be correct, I was hearing a lot of initial specs that said that this camera could change your, that you could actually change your f-stop whenever you're in live mode. And of course this is something we're all well familiar with at this point, so no need to beat a dead horse. But yeah, I went into the video mode. This is actually one of the first things I did with the camera yesterday when I picked it up. And you guys can see that, sure enough, you can't change video in live view. So yeah, if you still want to do that, looks like anything below the D750 still can't change f-stop when in live view mode. So that's just another side note. I suppose they were very, very in a hurry to release this camera. So someone typing the spec sheet lost a little bit in translation. I am still a little disappointed about the body design though, honestly. I really, really wish we had seen a better body design. And of course the whole thing about the autofocus in video too now disappoints me as well, because that's something that was initially stated and it turns out to not be the case. So all in all though, I still say this camera was a good upgrade. if I already had like a D7100, I wouldn't bother with the 7200 at all. It's just not enough of an update. If you have a 7100 right now, I would be looking towards full frame. I'd be looking towards a 750 or something along those lines personally. I don't necessarily think that Nikon is going to come out with a D400 camera just yet, or whatever the heck they decide to call it. I still, I am seeing more of a need for it, honestly, these days, because even something like a 7200 it still leaves a lot to be desired for a sport shooter. So maybe Nikon will do something else in the future. I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you guys how the buffer performs on both of these, and you'll see that there's quite a difference. So we're doing RAW in 14-bit mode. So basically kind of a worst case scenario here. And we're going to just go ahead and start shooting. Move the other camera out of the way. So not too bad. The buffer seems to clear pretty fast too. Yeah, so much better performance than we had on the 7100. I'll go ahead and show you guys that one now too. Okay, so now it's the 7100's turn. Same 14-bit RAW. And yeah, you can see it doesn't last very long at all, of course. About 6 frames before it has to stop. So huge difference between both cameras. Definitely, guys, write me in the comments below if you have questions. I will be doing some sample comparisons between the two cameras as soon as the RAW converters become available. And I'm not sure yet. I may make a separate video. But either way, I will make an annotation in this video to let you guys know, and that way you will be able to see this sample comparison. Write me in the comments if you have questions. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.